Hello, welcome to Locked On Sharks, the premier hockey podcast covering your favorite team in the Bay Area. We're back today with more draft profiles on one Marco Kasper, who's been kind of climbing up the rankings here. So we're going to dig into the power forward from Austria and see if he'd be a fit for the Sharks at number 11, or if the Sharks decide to move down, if he might be a steal for them later in the round. And of course, we can't do this by ourselves. So we have one Will Scouch, BFF of the show. Actually, even more of a BFF now that Kyle's gone. So he was actually said, I'm not coming back unless Kyle is gone. So I had to make the choice. And sorry, Kyle. So we'll get into Marco Kasper right after this.
You're Locked On Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm your host, JD Young, and today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline's got you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, so if you guys are kind of new to this or just kind of following along, if you're just a Will Scouch acolyte who just goes and consumes whatever media he puts out. So what we're going to do is I'm going to kind of talk about Marco Kasper a little bit, kind of give a little bit of a statistical profile of him, and then I'm going to have Scouch jump on and kind of give us more detail on this player, what his strengths, his weaknesses are, and where Scouch thinks he's actually going to end up getting drafted. So let's go ahead and look at one Marco Kasper. So he is a April 2004 kid from Austria. He's 6 foot 187 pounds, plays center on Rogel, which is just an awesome name. So he plays last year in the SHL. He played 46 games, had 7 goals, 4 assists for 11 points, and then the playoffs tacked on three goals, 3 assists for 6 points in 13 games. Also played on the J20 team where he had 13 points in 12 games. So power forward by nature. So right now we're going to bring on one Will Scouch to actually talk to us about Marco Kasper. Will, how's it going, buddy?
Howdy. How are we doing? I'm feeling pretty good. It's very, very busy this time of year, the last month-ish before the big day, big days. So it's a bit of crunch time, trying to film as much as I can and do as many more games as I can before the end of the year, but I'm doing well. How are you?
Do well. Can you confirm or deny your ultimatum about Kyle?
Absolutely confirm. It's so refreshing. It's so refreshing now that guy's friggin' gone.
But look, you got upgraded. Goodness. You got your own little background now on the, your name on instead of
BFF status cemented even further. Who would have thought?
Josh did send me a polo from.
I don't care. So... I know I'm better than him. He knows it too.
I almost wore it just to really rub it in.
Fair enough.
So Marco Kasper, from reading his profile, he is a power forward type of guy, right? Where almost kind of Joe Pavelski, where he likes to just sit in front and tip pucks and do fun stuff like that. So what makes Marco Kasper a guy who's been kind of rising up the boards, it seems like, since kind of the midterms?
Well, he had a pretty good playoff in the SHL. He's been playing against men all year. Like that's meaningful.
Yeah.
And he's been having a good year doing so. He's been one of the more productive junior-aged, if not the most productive junior-aged SHL player this year by game. I didn't see much of him playing at the under 20 level, but he also played pretty well down there apparently. But yeah, just look now, 6 points in his 13 playoff games with the SHL. That probably helps. Then he went to the World Championships, and I don't think he looked out of place in that team either. He was playing first line minutes, had great shot differentials. Like, he looks good in that situation. So you described him as a bit of a power forward, I would say. Yeah, and I think that's kind of where he is at. Like, maybe more of a grinder type, like he's physical, good north-south guy, not a tremendously sort of pacey, skilled player, but he grinds and gets the job done. And I think NHL teams and people publicly are sort of latching on to him, not just because he's producing points in the playoffs in the SHL and not just because he's at the World Championships and playing a lot of minutes, but because I think he's just showing what he's really good at, which I think a lot of teams are interested in. Do I think there's a massive ceiling with Marco Kasper? I mean, I can't say there isn't. I can't say there isn't like a better player here if you work on different areas of the game with him. But as he is now, he's like one of these guys where you don't worry about him when he's on the ice. He's going to grind things out along the boards if he has to. He can get his feet moving and move pucks up the ice well enough. He's a guy who gets to the net both offensively and defensively. He can be a tipping threat, but even in an open ice shooting situation, he's pretty good at it. So there's a lot to like with Casper. He plays a pretty simple but effective game, and I think it's easy to see him as some kind of NHL player. It just remains to be seen how much of an impact he'll bring, which is kind of the ultimate question when it comes to draft picks in the first round.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like you kind of say, he's almost like a GM catnip, where it's like, or coach's catnip, where it's like, he may not be like, the 6'5" type of guy, but like you don't have to worry about him when he's on the ice, right? Like he's going to just come out, he's going to produce, he's going to play hard in all three zones, et cetera, et cetera. So, but you kind of mentioned his ceiling. He's like, what do you kind of picture him being if he gets to the NHL?
I mean, it's interesting. I think he could play any forward position, really. Like, I think, I've seen him play in my tracking. I've seen him at every forward position this year. Personally, I think he could make a nice sort of third line center for a team. Like, could he play the wing? Absolutely. I would try to get him to play center, but if he can't work out, like he's got the size and I think he's got the sort of mind to play center. But if it doesn't really work out and he can't really drive results, then, you put him along the wing, give him a bit of a simpler role. And that could work for him. But I still think, could he be like a second line winger or something, like a grindy power winger that can work with more skilled guys? Yeah, I could see that being possible. But, I think as a good sort of third line, don't worry about him so much, but you're going to get good hockey out of him type player, especially if he gets a little stronger. A little bit of quickness wouldn't hurt either. The skill level, I'd say, kind of limits his potential for offense, but again, you can work on that. And so who knows where he goes with that. But I like Marco Kasper. He's a guy that, if you're drafting him at like 8, which I think could be the highest of high ends of where you could go, I think you're leaving a lot on the table for safety, quote unquote. If he's somehow there 17, 18, 19, 20th, and if you get a good third line guy in the middle to late first round, like that's a good draft pick. So I think to me that's reasonable. It's pretty easy to see him as a player in the NHL of some kind, and so yeah, and I've been more and more impressed with him over the course of the season, but I still believe that there's a bit of a ways to go before he's like really, really, really considered a top end player, like I think some people have recently been saying.
All right, before we continue on Marco Kasper, we're going to take a quick break and talk to you guys about our friends over at Athletic Greens. Guys, taking care of your stomach, taking care of your energy, you want better gut health, but you don't want to spend like $1 bajillion on taking all these vitamins and pills. That's where AG1 comes in. With one delicious scoop, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics to help you start your day off right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging, all those things. And the best thing about it, it costs you less than $3 a day. So you're investing in your health. It's cheaper than your cold brew habit. It's cheaper than getting all the different supplements yourself. You're investing in all-in-one nutritional insurance. And with Athletic Greens, they are a climate neutral certified company. In 2020, AG purchased carbon credits that support projects protecting old growth rainforests. For every purchase, they donate to organizations to help get nutritious foods to kids in need, including No Kid Hungry here in the U.S. In 2020, Athletic Greens donated over 1.2 million meals to kids. And so they're going to make it easy for you. Head over to Athletic Greens. They'll give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. Take ownership over your health. Get the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. All right, so Casper, he feels very kind of high floor, low ceiling type of guy where, I mean, safe pick, I guess, is what you're saying here. What do you think
Yeah.
is the big thing he needs to kind of work on as he kind of progresses to the NHL?
I mean, I think it's the thing with him is, he's a very, like, looking at my tracking data, and I've looked at a few different guys that have played in the SHL here and there, and there are a lot of areas where he stands out, like just generating shots from the middle, getting to the front of the net, banging in rebounds, all that stuff. He does that better than most guys, and is in the right place at the right time when it comes to sort of perimeter shots and capitalizing on loose pucks in front kind of thing. He does that really well. He's got a pretty good shot himself from open ice, but when I look at the rest of his data, like, he has trouble controlling offensive transitions. He's, low pass volumes, low pass success, and one of the lowest rates of shot assists that I've tracked. Really not much of a factor in terms of driving the offense that his team creates, and they really do struggle to generate offensive 5-on-5. But I think that in order to sort of cross that bridge, I mean, with him, I want to see a little bit more sort of agility out of him. Like, he's a guy who moves his feet a lot to get around the ice and applies pressure really well. But when the puck's on his stick, he's not very deceptive with it. You can kind of tell that he's just going to barrel up the ice in one direction, or, maybe use crossovers a little bit to sort of slowly go from one lane or from the boards in or inwards towards the boards or something. Like, he'll change things like that, but it's not very dynamic or high end, I would say. The skill level for him, I think, is adequate for that sort of straight line game that he plays, that real basic north-south forward type game that he plays. So I would like to see improvements at that level, because he's got some size, he's got some mass behind him when he skates. He gets a lot of momentum going, but in terms of shutting him down, I feel like it's a little bit too easy now. But then when he's off puck, he's sort of again back into that get the puck back mode, grinding play out along the boards and sort of chasing things down. He's an effective, he's an okay offensive transition player for sure. But I think that in terms of what might be, at least from my perspective, limiting him from being a really high-end pick in this draft is just that when it comes to evading pressure and using line mates with his passing and just that extra level of deception that I think can trick defenses into giving you some space to play with, that can be pretty vital to generating offense. He doesn't really bring that, at least not right now and in the games that I've seen. So could that change over the next few years? Absolutely. A couple more years in Sweden, maybe he comes to the AHL, or if he has a couple of good SHL seasons, he jumps straight to the NHL, and he's capable enough at both ends. He ties up sticks in front. Like, you don't see him screwing up defensively that often. You don't see him doing a ton of things in the offensive zone that really make you go, holy crap. But he gets to the right areas, and especially off the puck, he knows where to go. He knows where to be. He knows what to do. Which is, he's dependable, if not like the most dynamic, impressive offensive player likely on your NHL team.
Yeah, so he seems like you were just saying. He seems like a not very flashy guy, but he gets the job done, and
Yeah.
he's kind of super effective. So you kind of talked about his timeline a little bit. So you think he's probably 2 to 3 years out before he's really making an impact in the NHL?
I mean, I think you give him at least another season. His contract in Sweden runs out after next year.
Mhm.
So maybe he goes for one more year. He did get better in terms of production over the course of the season. His playoff was good, and he was one of the better players on the Austrian team for the World Championship group, or the World Championship team. So that's potentially a bright thing looking forward to next year. But I still also see him still trying to develop that offensive, dynamic, flashy side to his game. And if that comes, maybe another year could do it. But I with him, I don't feel like there's any rush. I think I would want him developing that offensive side of his game a little bit more, getting a little bit more confident on that end of things over the course of the next season or two. And he's already got the mind, he's got the defensive game, he's got the off puck play already. I feel like rushing him into the NHL kind of solidifies him in that role. So I would see how a bit more time does for him. Like, he could go back to the World Junior Championships next year, give him maybe even 2 years of that experience and just really sort of learn how to sort of flex those muscles offensively a little bit more than he did. So we'll see how it goes for him. I would think that, like, conservatively speaking, you might see him cross the pond in 2 seasons. I would think that would be my bar, and it's like, we'll see how he is then. But if he like knocks our socks off next year, which could be possible, then things might change.
You talked about it, like the way he thinks the game. So is he like one of those cerebral, like William Eklund. I mean, I'm assuming he's not like a William Eklund, like the way he thinks it, but how is his hockey IQ? I guess is kind of the best question.
It's simple and effective, I think. Like he's not anticipating play so well that he's not like in the right place at the right time to cut off passing lanes and everything in the defensive end. He's not that kind of a player. He just knows how to pursue guys in the defensive end. He knows how to apply physical pressure. And when it comes to off puck in the offensive and defensive end, he just seems to be in the middle of the ice and tying up a man defensively, or in the middle of the ice trying to get some space for himself to be a tipping threat or a rebound threat. Even sort of skating out of that middle of the ice when he sees a loose puck for a sort of turn and shot threat from the faceoff circle or something like that. He can do all of those things. It's not, I don't look at him and go, this is a guy who's gonna, no one's gonna be able to figure out what he's gonna do. He's not an unpredictable player, but he is predictable in a good way. Like, what you're getting out of him. It's pretty basic, but it's really effective for what it is. And I feel like that's another reason why teams and people are really interested in this guy, because he just goes out, doesn't bite off more than he can chew, and drives, I would say, okay results in that area. I mean, I think there's still, like, the offensive side of things is where there needs to be a little bit more refinement and improvement.
So, of course, even though Kyle's gone, still on a personal quest to find William Eklund a friend.
Right.
How would Casper and Eklund kind of mesh together?
I think they could easily work together. Like, I like watching Eklund when he's diving around the offensive zone and playing along the boards or cutting into the middle. And Casper's a guy who I don't think will step on his toes in that area of the game, but could be a good sort of follow-up threat relative to a guy like Eklund, who might be more of the guy that's possessing the puck a lot more. Would I draft Marco Kasper if he was available at San Jose's pick this year? You'd have to really convince me, and you'd have to really think that he's going to be worth it, but I probably wouldn't do it. I like Marco Kasper. I think he'll be an effective NHL player, especially defensively. I think that he just kind of gets it and knows where to be and when, and he gets the job done enough transporting the puck up the ice with where there's signs that are bright for his future that I'm not super concerned. But I mean, if I'm playing a center to play with William Eklund, I also want someone who has more tangible offensive output and potential, which I don't know if Casper has it. But unless you just go, yeah, but he could develop that. He could develop XYZ, and it's like, well, yes, but you're kind of hoping that he develops that, as opposed to guys who might be available sooner that actually have those offensive traits that might actually come together a little bit more now, that is less risky. So could he be that guy? Sure. But I don't think he'd be the number one target on that list for me.
Makes sense. All right, before we continue, let's take a quick break and talk to you guys about our friends over at BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports info. Find the latest sports developments, news, and odds, including this year's basketball championships, NHL conference finals, Major League Baseball, and of course, latest fighting news from MMA and UFC to boxing. BetOnline, your continued source for all your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and more. So head to their website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the transaction. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right. You are GM Scouch. You work for said team in the middle of the draft. Pick your why would you want to draft him?
Marco, why would you want to draft Marco Kasper?
Kasper, yep. Because you're not getting fired if you draft Marco Kasper.
Probably not. Yeah, that helps. I mean, I think Casper is an interesting, he's an interesting person to keep an eye on for the next few years. I mean, all these guys are, but I'll be really interested to see how he goes. Because, I mean, he'd be an interesting case study of how much development can you really get out of a guy. Like, I think that, you've got a guy who, if you're drafting him, say, San Jose at 11, right? They're 11,
San Jose is at 11.
So if you draft him at 11, you're drafting a guy who doesn't really have a really high pace offensive game, a guy who doesn't have a ton of real tangible deceptive skill to his game with the puck on his stick. You don't have a guy who that often in my data has used his line mates that much to sort of create shots outside of him. He's a guy who his offensive game is projectable to the NHL though, and he's a guy whose mind for positioning and where he is on the ice and when is projectable to the NHL. So I mean, I don't know. I the name that keeps popping into my head with him, and I'm not comparing their play styles directly, but in terms of like the type of role, I could see him being more of like a Brandon Sutter type guy, where certain NHL teams just love the guy and they will pay a lot to get him because he's, really no nonsense. He just goes out there, drives decent results, defense first results, but can put points up here and there and have a pretty good time doing it. I think Casper shoots the puck pretty well from open ice too, but he didn't get the chance to do that very often in the games that I tracked. But he wasn't taking shots from the perimeter. He wasn't just a guy lobbing pucks on net. Like, he just also didn't touch the puck that often in the offensive zone. It was more just, I'm going to the net, I'm going to grind things out and be a cycle player along the boards and everything, and then be a follow-up threat or in front of the net. So I see him as more of a role player like that. So, do I take that at 11? Probably not. But if someone does, I kind of see why. And if the development really hits and he really becomes a lot more comfortable on his frame with his skill and generates some more speed and builds on his agility, becomes a little more deceptive with the puck, then yeah, sure. It's just, I think you're hoping that he then becomes maybe as offensively talented with the puck on his stick, not just getting to the net, as some other guys that I have ranked a little bit higher than him. But he's 20 on my list. Like, it's not outlandish to see him be picked in this year's draft. I'd say as high as like 7 or 8. It would be surprising, but I don't think it's outlandish.
That does have a little bit of a sense pick feel to it, doesn't it? But,
maybe.
So do you think maybe if he just has better line? I mean, I haven't watched his SHL team. Do you think maybe if he just has more talent around him, he might be able to kind of produce more? I mean, but that's kind of the whole chicken and egg thing where it's like,
Yeah.
Are you the actual driving the play, or are you just kind of benefiting from it with him?
Yeah, I mean, I see it as, I mean, it wouldn't hurt, especially if you sort of remove him as your primary offensive transition driver. Like right now, I see him at over 30% involvement on those transitions offensively, which is good. Like, that's, top 40 in my list, but that's also top 40 while being in the SHL all year, which is pretty good. But he's losing control on 46% of them, which is pretty bad. Like, that puts him 71st out of, I think, 80 forwards I've tracked. So that sample might include also like a lot of other SHL guys I've tracked, but usually you want to see that number a little bit higher. Could it be higher? Absolutely. He's a guy where he's an adequate puck transporter, I would say. But if you surround him with guys who are better at it than him, and then, yeah, like, I don't think there's anything. It's just, then you're turning him into a defense first guy who just gets to the net at both ends. And it's like, well, what value does that have? And how often are you going to come across players in the NHL that you could just sign as free agents or get in a trade? Like, there's probably quite a few of those guys. So, I mean, I would try to develop a bit more of a dynamic offensive game out of him and try to get him a little bit more confident with the puck and a little more comfortable in that situation. But better line mates, I think, would definitely sort of help him settle into a role that is more productive. But I think it's a little early to sort of make that judgment call, and I would see what you could get out of him over the next few years developing him overseas.
All right. Where does he go?
God. Well, let me just look at the lottery here. I mean, I get the feeling he will go to one of the lottery teams. I'd be surprised. I mean, my first instinct has been New York, the Islanders. I think he really seems like a guy that the Islanders not only can would actually fit on that team, but also they already have guys on the NHL roster that I think he could maybe not play like, but sort of aim to be like. Guys like Brock Nelson and Anders Lee, like these big forwards that have some point production ability. They're not slouches on the ice. Like, they've got size, they're physical, but they're not like absolute standouts, but they get the job done. And I think
such an Islanders pick now that
I
you
feel like
mentioned it.
I feel
Oh
like
my-
something like that.
Yeah.
I feel like something like that makes sense. I mean, I don't know if they want to go in a different direction from Barry Trotz completely. But they hired one of his assistants, I think, right, to be the head coach. So I get the feeling they want to sort of stick with that Lou Lamoriello brand, and I could see Casper fitting in there, and maybe he won't be their sort of top 6 forward of the future that can score for them, but he to me, he plays Islanders hockey. So at 13, that's kind of the first place my head has gone, and I could see it happening.
All right. So we've already asked you before, like, who you think would be the best player. We've asked you, all this. So which player in the draft has risen the most, you think, for you personally since the start of like the process, I guess?
Oof. Since the beginning of the season?
Wherever you want to pick from.
I
Yeah,
mean, like starting from the beginning of the year, I really didn't think I was going to like Vladimir Gradinin as much as I did. I have him in the top 20. I love that guy, and NHL teams don't. I mean, he's not at the combine. He's not, I mean, I imagine that's also part of the, he's overseas in Russia, and I don't think there are any Russians that are from Russia in the combine this year. So in any case, he is a player that wire to wire I didn't expect much, and it didn't take very long for him to sort of get higher on my board. The other one I'll point out is Lane Hudson. I watched I watched him at the U18s last year, and he was outstanding. And I thought, okay, I don't care how big this guy is. Like, he's a first round pick. Like, he's just so dynamic and skilled and shifty and like an unbelievable player off the blue line, just a great offensive creator. And then I watched the first couple of games that I tracked this season, and it was, October, November, and he just did not look like the same Lane Hudson, like at all. And I thought, okay, like he just had a really good tournament. He had good players around him. He's got the shiftiness and skill, but the defensive game is bad. And, he's just not very quick on his feet, and he's really small and, not really much of a factor defensively. And it's like, so yeah, when the puck's in the offensive zone, sure, he can do some cool stuff once in a while, but it's not enough to sort of overcome the downside. But I'd say ever since December, every time I've watched him, he's just gotten better and better. I mean, at one point, I think he was closer to like 50 on my board, or like around the middle of the year. I could be wrong. I'll have to go check, but he was significantly lower. And just over the last few games I did of his, I just finished his data set last week. I've been writing notes on the report that's coming on him, and he's just been outstanding down the stretch. Just unbelievably good. Just so much better, so much more comfortable and confident, and using his skill better and deceiving guys. I mean, I've seen him just break ankles on a number of different occasions, shaking guys off in transition. So I think there's a lot to like with Lane Hudson, even though he's small. But I'll go to bat for him in the first round now, and I wouldn't have done that a month and a half ago if you asked me. Like, I probably would say, if he slips through the second round, maybe you pick him as a high upside, low floor swing. And I think he's still that for sure. I think there's a chance he never plays in the NHL, but I still want to try. I still really like him. I still think he's got enough talent where it's like, yeah, let's see where this goes, especially if you can get him sort of in the second round, for example, which seems possible. I mean, 16 teams didn't even interview him this weekend, so who knows where he's going to get drafted. But he's a guy that I think, especially in the last few months, has really, really taken a step for me.
Awesome, Will. You've said it all. What?
Hooray.
Hooray. What do you have coming out next?
Yeah, so lots and lots of reports. We have the McKeen's draft guide coming out pretty soon, so you can stay tuned. There's some video team work in there that we're putting together. There, you can also find me on YouTube. There's lots of stuff going on. We've got live streams out the wazoo coming down the stretch before the draft. I will be in Montreal for the actual event, which I'm very, very excited for.
Fancy.
Yeah, it's going to be a good time. What else? You can subscribe on Patreon. There's tons of things you can get from there. Data cards, tracked data, prospect information, all kinds of stuff that you want. Or you can join on the YouTube channel. There's a YouTube membership program there. Same prices, same tiers, same everything. So check all that out. But yeah, the big thing now is a lot of videos are on the way, and the McKeen's draft guide's coming pretty soon. So
who's your next video you got coming out? Can you spoil?
It will be Simone Nemec. Yeah, we got Nemec coming, and then who's the next one? I've got so many in production right now that I'm losing track of them. But Matthew Savoy is coming after that. And then I did 3 more today or yesterday. So we'll see. Got a lot coming. But yeah, so Nemec is next.
Awesome. You can, of course, find me, still weird saying me, Locked On Sharks on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can, of course, listen to wherever you get podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Odyssey, tin cans on a string. I think my children might be coming through the ceiling here in a second.
Oh, okay.
They want to go to the pool really bad. Of course, subscribe on YouTube. The goal is to get to 1,000 subscribers before the draft. So make sure if you guys haven't, please subscribe. We've got a ton more of these draft profiles coming out. And then check out tomorrow, San Jose Sharks prospect Gannon Larocque just signed his ELC, just named captain of the Victoria Royals, who Scouch didn't have time for when he was doing his draft profiles in 2021.
I did not.
Look at you now.
I did not know who that name was, and look at me now.
Look at you now. So yeah, Larocque will be on
Big
tomorrow.
idiot.
And then Wednesday, Byron Bader, who's going to be talking about his draft model and guys that he likes, and we're going to talk some of the Sharks prospects there. So you can, of course, follow me on Twitter at myfryhole, and we'll be back tomorrow. Bye, friends.